Good morning, guys, listening live and watching on Facebook and YouTube as well. My name is Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor, along with Jennifer Lovely. We're here today, nice and early for you. What time is it there, Jen?
I know. It's just now 6 a.m. where I am. So
you see what we bring you, guys? We're up at all sorts of hours. Well, I'm not. Jennifer's at all sorts of hours to bring you the show to make sure we get the best of the best already.
Yes.
Viewers watching.
Yes. So good morning, everyone.
Yeah. So what we usually do is usually have a chit chat. We usually play some stuff. Can't do that today, guys, because Damen West has got about 7 hours worth of awesome stuff that we need to fit in the next 45 minutes, mate. All right, mate. Lovely. Okay. So quick break and then hold on to your chairs and call your granny because this stuff is going to be amazing. Good morning, guys. Welcome back to the show. The listeners are already more than it was yesterday, and we're only 35 seconds in. That is crazy. Jennifer Lovers is with me. Damen West has joined us again, part 2. If you saw the show yesterday, you know you're up for a treat. Good morning, Damen. How you doing?
Man, good morning, Dr. Rob. Good morning, Jennifer. How are you? Man, you're up bright and early over there.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. Your story was so captivating. I had to hear the rest. And you were a great conversation at my dinner table last night. So,
oh wow, that makes me feel so good. That is so cool. I mean, you just never know how your life can impact other lives, and that's what recovery is all about, right?
It is. It is. It was so good, and I ended up talking to my son, you know, who spent some time in jail and had the heroin addiction. Well, one of them, and he loved the story about the coffee bean.
Oh yeah, it's one of those stories that, especially in our world of recovery, you can latch onto, you know, because I mean everybody wants to become that coffee bean, and we've all been the carrot, we've all been there. Hell, my wife told me last week I was the carrot and the egg in the same day. So I mean, I get it, man. It happens. Shit happens.
Let's get straight in, Damen. Oh, by the way, that nice shirt. By the way, if you have any spare shirts, I want one of those.
Got it, Dr. Rob. I know a guy that can get you one.
Excellent.
Hey, speaking of that, you got to hear the story about the guy that makes the shirts. This is a great story. This is, whenever we get to it, just remind me about the shirts.
Go now. We're on T-shirts. Go.
All right. So when I was in prison, when I was doing time, so I lived in a maximum security prison, a level 5 penitentiary in Texas, the highest classification you could be. I got a life sentence. I'm on with all the lifers, and I meet this guy in prison named Bill Seeley. And Bill, he went by the nickname Wild Bill, which was ironic because he's very calm. He wasn't wild at all. A little bit older than I was. He was arrested around the same time I was in a different county in Texas. So we ended up at prison and met each other on the Mark Stiles unit. And Bill was a model inmate just like me. He was a coffee bean. And we went through all the same prison programs together. We'd get into every chapel group. We'd get into AA, NA. You know, this guy was in all the educational programs. He wanted to better himself. We came up for parole the same day, March 25th, 2015. We both have our parole interview. I go before him. He goes after me. And I make parole that year. He does not. And it's just great. He's got 99 years for theft, securities fraud, and money laundering. He was an oil and gas guy here in Texas. And he did a deal where he stole $500,000 from his partners in an oil deal. He was an oil and gas operator. So Bill didn't make parole. I did. And I got out and stayed in touch with Bill. And Bill thought for some reason that he'd never hear from me again. But I stayed in touch with Bill the whole time. He gets denied for parole every year that he comes up. Every year he comes up, denied. So last year, May of 2019, my book had just come out, and I know that all the parole voters in Texas have a copy of The Change Agent. And I called Bill's mother up in May of 19. I said, hey, you know, if you had a chance to talk to the lead voter on parole about Bill's parole, she said, yeah, I had a conversation with him, and it went terrible. They're going to keep him in another year. And she's getting older. She's aging. She's like, Damen, I don't know why they want to keep my son so badly. So, y'all, I don't know if it was emotion or if I just picked up the phone and I called the lead voter for parole. Now, remember, I'm on parole for the rest of my life, y'all. I'm on parole until 2073. And I'm calling one of the most powerful people in parole in Texas and saying, hey, I need to have a conversation with you about my friend Bill. And I mean, his secretary, of course, she's a gatekeeper. She's trying to keep me off the phone. And I'm like, ma'am, I know that my book, The Change Agent, is on his desk because I know that he's got my book. Please tell him it's Damen West. I got to talk to him. The guy gets on the phone. He's like, Mr. West, it's very unusual for a guy that's on parole to be demanding to talk to me, a parole voter. He said, but I'm reading your book and I love it. What can you tell me about Bill? Oh my God, I'm in the room, man. I didn't plan to get this far. I'm like the dog that caught the car. What do I do? You know, so I go with this guy and I go in this conversation for 10 minutes. We're going back and forth. He's telling me why he's got to keep Bill in, you know, the amount of money that was stolen. And I'm telling him why he got to let Bill go, the reform and the recovery that Bill's experienced in prison that he could never know about unless someone tells him. And I'm like, look, man, I'll never be able to call about anybody in prison, but I know this guy intimately well. Please let my friend go. And I said, hey, you know, I said, sir, have you gotten to the part of the book in The Change Agent about the coffee bean, the story of the coffee bean? He said, man, I just read that part. I loved it. I love the analogy. I said, look, man, Bill is a coffee bean. And if you let Bill go and give his buck to someone else that is a threat to society, then I'll make sure Bill has a job. I'll make sure he gets to his meetings, his recovery meetings. Please let my friend go. And he said, you know, Mr. West, I really appreciate your call today. And thank you for bringing me some new information on Bill. I think it's a time we look at Bill's parole differently this year. The next week, he walked out of prison. Wow. I mean, boom, just like that. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I got to find a job for Bill. I told him I'd give Bill a job. So I started making the T-shirts. Bill starts selling T-shirts, Be a Coffee Bean T-shirt. And y'all, let's be honest. This Be a Coffee Bean thing is not really taking off like that to where we have our own merchandising line. Bill sells maybe 4 shirts a month, right? But he's the happiest guy in the world for a guy that only sells 4 shirts a month. You know, he's got a job. He may sell 10 shirts in a good month. May of this year, it's the coronavirus pandemic, right? And everybody's been thrown for a loop. But I mean, look, we live in a world of recovery, one day at a time. Try to control the things you control, what you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. So the speaker market has just evaporated, and there's no one having any authors come out for book signings anymore. So I called Bill up and I said, hey, Bill, listen, man. You were oil and gas guy. We used to be on the rec yard at the Styles unit, y'all. They have refineries out about where we were in Beaumont. And Bill would tell me, he said, one day, Wes, we're going to get out of here. We're going to start an oil and gas company. And our oil is going to be in those refineries. And I'm like, man, whatever, dude. We're serving life in prison, right? I said, Bill, listen, man. Can you find oil under the ground in Texas? Can you really do that still? Do you think your knowledge from back then can apply now? He said, Damen, I can do it. And I've been waiting for you to call me about this. And so I started an oil and gas company. I became an oil and gas operator. Bill can't be an oil and gas operator because of parole stipulations, but he works for me. And he goes out and finds me oil leases. And Coffee Bean Energy was born in June of 2020. And we sell oil on the open market now as an oil and gas company. I mean, this guy that I was in prison with, that I'm in recovery with, to this day we go to meetings. And now I have an oil and gas company, and Bill works for me at Coffee Bean Energy. It's just wild because, I mean, how in the world does, that's the program of recovery though, y'all. That's what happens in recovery. These amazing things happen in a program of recovery, but that's the long answer, Dr. Robb, to who has these shirts. I'll get Bill in touch with you, man.
I can't believe that I just asked you a quick question about a teacher and you come out with that fucking gem of a story that we wouldn't have even heard of.
It's crazy, man.
My life. Are you kidding me?
I know. I'm dying. I'm curious, Dr. Robb. I think we need to get in on the oil world.
The words right out of my mouth. I'm like, I'm calling them. We're finished. Me and Jen want some shares in that shit. I'm telling you.
The price of oil is up to like $48 a barrel now. I mean, and Bill, all Bill does, he goes out and finds me good leases. And if it's a lease I want, I get with the lawyers and they work it out. And you're selling oil. I mean, but it's just
crazy.
I mean, who would have thought? But that's recovery, though, y'all. You stick around. Don't leave before the miracle happens, right?
That is right. I love that. So, take us back. You're talking about race. You're talking about what Dr. Robb left off with. Tell me about race. You told us the story about inside the prison, and that is where we left off yesterday. So can you recollect? Can you bring us back?
Yeah, no. So race is such the overriding theme in prison is race. Race is king in prison. I mean, race controls everything. It's the way the inmates want it. Everybody is expected to go with their own race. But my mother gave me this directive. She said, no gangs, Damen. No, don't get one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs. And So I did that. I fought with my life. I mean, every day that I was in there, it was a battle for the first couple months I was there. But I wanted to be able to maneuver, to be able to navigate my way through prison with all the races. And I eventually earned that respect. And that's why Sabor, one of my favorite cellmates that talked to me about race on the way out, he wanted to know if I would do this on the outside. I mean, because the black guys in there, they would tell me, all right, man, there's not another white guy like you out there, Damon, and that's what Sabor was asking me, to go out there and share what I learned inside there. And it's one of the reasons why I went and got my master's in criminal justice once I got out of prison, because I thought, you know what, how can I have the biggest impact? And one of the biggest impacts I get to have is I teach at the University of Houston downtown. I'm a professor, a college professor, and the class I teach is called Prisons in America. So I get to teach the next generation of criminal justice practitioners about the realities of prison America. And the first 2 weeks of my class are about racism in America, racism in the system. We have multiple criminal justice systems in this country. We have a black one, a white one, a brown one, a rich one, a poor one. Hell, there's one for cops. You see that play out all the time. And everybody is in these different criminal justice systems. And it's a fantasy to believe that this country is just blind with its justice and fair to everybody, because it's not. You go into a prison and half the population is black. They look back at you, they're black faces, and you're like, man, what is happening with America? But America is sick, y'all. But that's the thing. I mean, I love this country. So what do? We've got to try to heal a sick country. But the challenge I give to every group I talk to when I talk about racism in America is that every generation of Americans that have come before us, since the country was founded, even before the country was founded, has failed to fix this problem or did not want to address this problem. So what does this generation do? Do we do anything about it now? I guess we'll find out and see.
That'll be interesting to follow that thing. I remember somebody calling me last minute on a Friday night, said, Dr. Robb, you got to help me. You got to help me. I'm supposed to speak at this place. I can't make it. Can you help? And I said, yeah, of course. So he gave me the address. And I go down there just outside Dallas, and it's a strict lockdown prison just outside Dallas. I've never heard of it before. Anyway, they get me in through security, and I'm like, damn, this is really, really tight. I wonder what's going on here. And then this arrogant kind of cop walks me through to the gymnasium, walks me to the middle of the floor, says, good luck, walks out, slams the door, locks it all. I'm surrounded by at least 100 black guys, just all lined up. I'm wasting their time. I wish this guy'd go. We've got better things to do. And they're all there waiting for me. And all you can see off them is their bedrooms. There's no way out of this place. So I pick the big book, and I'm like, my name's Robb, I'm a recovered alcoholic. That's what I said, a fucking recovered alcoholic. If you don't like it, you don't like this book, I suggest you get the fuck out of here. And I put my book down, and I swear to God, about 40 of them guys got up and walked out. Now my head's going, David. Can you imagine the head going when you're speaking? And I'm picking stuff up, and I'm yelling and screaming. The 40 guys that went out grabbed a big book and walked back in again.
No way.
Yes. And I was like, holy moly. And that sort of got me on the right track. It doesn't make no difference where they are. I've never been in prison. I've been in jail. But you can pass the message if you have the passion to do so. And you also hit on something else. It's like the masters. If I have a master's in criminal justice, people are going to listen to me rather than just a guy off the street. That's one of the reasons I went back to school to get my second PhD, because Dr. Robb Kelly, he's okay. Oh, no. He's a double PhD. Oh, this crazy guy. I got to listen to this crazy guy. It was an in all the way. The better we get in. So I want to ask you a question that I wanted yesterday. Is why do you think you got parole?
That's a good question. Look, I think that I can't be sincere and be genuine and authentic without saying that, hey, I'm sure race plays a role in this, because I don't have the same background as a lot of those other guys. The lady from parole told me, she said, we don't see a lot of people come through like you, Mr. West. I mean, she talked about my work experience. I worked in Congress. I worked for a guy running for president. Hell, I worked on Wall Street. They don't see a lot of people in state prison with that kind of pedigree. But what they did see is a lot of people that come in and do the same things I did. I mean, I committed street level crimes and serious crimes against people. But I think that my support system, that plays a big role in it. My parents came to visit me over 150 times when I was in prison. I mean, I was in prison in the town right next to where I grew up. Beaumont and Port Arthur are right next to each other. I grew up in Port Arthur, and so I'm in Beaumont doing time. And I think that plays a role into it. I think my obvious rehabilitation and what I was able to do with myself when I was in prison. But that's not unique. I'm not unique in all this. I mean, there's other people that turn their lives around inside there. So when I'm asked this question, one of the first things I always say, yeah, hey, I think race played a role in that, because I don't want somebody to sit there and come back and say, well, I mean, you're not genuine about race. You don't even think yeah, of course. But I always throw this out too. But if race plays a role in me getting out of prison, what role did it play in me getting a life sentence for my first felony conviction ever for a bunch of property crimes around meth, right? I mean, I got a life sentence. I had 2 paid attorneys. And it's like one of the black guys told me in prison, man, they said, man, you got the black treatment when you went into the prison. I did, man. I got a life sentence, man, right out of the gate. But I also made parole my first time up. So things kind of equaled out. But the real answer to this, guys, and I wanted to give that answer because I want to be authentic, but I think it's a higher power thing. I think it's a universe thing. I think it's one of those deals where the universe says, hey, look, God, whatever you call it, it's like when I'm walking out of prison. This happened when I walked out of prison. There's a voice I hear saying, hey, look, you went through this for a reason. Now you're going to work out there, and you're going out there to share this message with as many people as you can. And, this is God's show. And the minute you start thinking it's your show, turn back around and check this out, because you're coming back, So that's what I think it really is. I think that the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, said, hey, look, we're going to use you now. We put you through this for a reason. And now it's time to go. Let's get you to work, because you can't deny what you can see. I mean, it's this story about this little guy like me overcoming everything. Man, something had to be taking care of me through there. I mean, it was something bigger going on than just me. It's not about me. It's about something bigger. It's about recovery.
Well, and on that point, so a couple things. My son, who's obviously white, got put in jail for residential burglary. His attorney said he's looking at several years in prison, right? I paid for attorneys for both of my kids because I don't trust our system, and I believed in them. They both got out. I mean, they both did jail time, but they didn't do prison time. I absolutely believe that it's because they were white, not because I think that if they were any other color, they would have been thrown into prison. But I wanted to say, I was having this conversation last night at dinner, and this is what came up. You have had to go through, and part of it, consequences, horrendous, I'm sure, experiences in prison. And I was talking about, people that live up here, they believe in God, they live life is pretty easy, or the people that have had to really experience some shit. Myself, you, Dr. Robb, and it really forces you to go deep inside. Do you regret anything? Do you wish that you had lived up on that higher plane and life was just good? Or are you glad that you went through all of this?
That's a 2-part answer. One, I would first say that, unfortunately for my victims and my family are probably my biggest victims, by the way. I mean, our families, just like you went through it with your sons, I drug my family through hell. I mean, because when we go to prison, we don't just go to prison by ourselves. We take our families with us, and we lock everybody up, right? That's a selfishness of our disease. So, it's unfortunate that people had to suffer for the things I did. But here's the thing. I don't second guess. I don't look back and question anything that's going on in my past. I mean, anything at all. People ask me all the time, if you could change anything, would you? And the answer is no, I would not. I would not change anything. Because we are the sum of our experiences, and position determines perspective. And it depends on where you are and what you've seen is the kind of world that you see when you look out too. But that's how we get to a point where we have people that can be these walking teachers. Like a pedagogist is a Greek word for like a walking teacher, But that's how we get those people. Look, and in my life, and I talk to Christians, I talk to all kinds of different groups. But look, whatever you call it, God, your higher power, whatever, God's never reached down and just put his hand on my head and say, hey, Damon, you're healed. No, that shit doesn't happen in real life. Not for me, it doesn't. But instead, God put people in my life. And these people, when I was younger, they were like, teachers or coaches. But later on in life, these people are like Mr. Jackson that gives me the coffee in the store, or Carlos, my first cellmate in prison, that gives me, this guy's going to come meet me in the shower one night that he tells me about one day. And Carlos gives me a weapon to kill this guy with. And I didn't kill him. But there's people that have been put in my life, but I have to be receptive to those people. They carry this message with them every time. And you can call it an angel if you want. People are put into our lives to teach us lessons and help guide us from one stage to the next. And I believe that's how, with my life experiences and the things that have happened, good and bad, that's how I've become to other people to give them hope too. And that's the thing. We want to try to bring other people hope. So no, I would not change anything.
Yeah.
Excellent. Me neither. And listen, guys, Damen West is on the show. Stick around. We'll be right back after this. Hey guys, welcome back. This is the Recovery Channel podcast coming to you live today on Facebook and YouTube. Good to be with you guys. Thank you very much for watching right now. And if you're listening tonight on the podcast, goes up to most platforms. It's not every platform. Okay, so going on yesterday, the story of the coffee bean. There's plenty of people watching right now, and some of them might not have heard the coffee bean story. Can just about putting it in the pot. Can you just tell them again? Because it's going to change their life.
Yeah, so I was getting ready to go to serve a life sentence in a maximum security prison, and this other inmate in Dallas County Jail is trying to explain to me what prison is going to be like, and that's when he tried to sum it up for me in a very simple way and understandable way, and the lesson was it's one of the best lessons I've ever learned in my life. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water, and he said, anything we put in this pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in this pot of boiling water, and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So he walks me through it. He said, if I put a carrot in that pot of boiling water we call prison, the carrot turns soft. It goes in the water hard, but the water, the prison, the circumstances in life turn the hard carrot soft. It's soft and mushy and weak. He said, you don't want to be the carrot in prison. And he told me about the egg. He said, the egg is the shell that protects it physically, but inside that shell, that soft liquid core, the egg's heart becomes hardened. This happens when life beats us down, makes us mad and angry and mean, and no one wants to be around the egg. And he said, if you become the egg, that means you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And if you're incapable of giving or receiving love, you've become institutionalized. And that's when he asked me, he said, what about the coffee bean? And I had no clue about the coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And that's what Mr. Jackson shared with me, the magic of the coffee bean. He said, if I put a coffee bean in that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you got to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, West, the smallest of these three things, small like you, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot, because the power was inside the coffee bean, just like the power is inside of you. He said that everything else was changed by the boiling water. The carrot and the egg were changed by the water, but the coffee bean was the only thing that changed the water. And he said, everybody in life puts that energy, negative or positive. He said, whatever kind of energy we put out, we attract back. It's called the law of attraction. He said, so if you want to walk around prison all the time with a mean mug on your face and a scowl and look hard, you're going to attract the hardest people into your world. He said, but if you walk around that place with a smile on your face and you let those guys over there not getting you, they can't break you. No matter what they do, they can't break you. He said, man, you'll change prison from the inside out like that coffee bean. And the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates, they'll find you because of your energy. The law of attraction. And it works. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me before I got on that prison bus in August of 2009 to be shipped off to serve my life sentence, he said, West, go out there and go be a coffee bean. Be a coffee bean, Dr. Robb. And that's what life is about, being the coffee bean. Because life is a pot of boiling water. But we have a choice of how we respond to the boiling water. That's the thing that's the power. Being a coffee bean, there's several ways. There's several things you have to do to be a coffee bean. One of them is knowing about the things you control in life. And I learned this lesson in the program of recovery in prison. I got into an AA group in prison, and it was the best thing ever happened to me when I got into recovery in 2011. Now, mind you, a SWAT team on July 30th, 2008 takes me into sobriety at gunpoint. I never have a drink or a drug after that day that I was arrested by the SWAT team. But I'm not in recovery. And recovery is a whole different thing, because now you're living outside yourself. Now you're living for a higher purpose. That's what recovery was all about, getting outside of self. So I got into these meetings, and I learned one day about what we control and what we don't control. So I walk into the meeting, and in that meeting, we start off our meetings with the Serenity Prayer. I know y'all know the Serenity Prayer, right? So you start the meeting off with the Serenity Prayer. The guy from the outside, from the free world, brings it in. And he has a chalkboard in there. And he says the first part of the prayer, he said, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. He draws a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. He said, the things you cannot change, Damen, are on God's line. And he points to that line on the chalkboard. He said, now God's line is infinitely long. It's bigger than that chalkboard. Your higher power's line is way bigger than that chalkboard. He said, and every time you try to touch something off of God's line, you hurt yourself and you hurt other people. He said, because your higher power, God, doesn't need your help. So stay off of God's line. Then he went and erased a little inch out of God's line. He held his fingers up an inch apart for the whole room to see. He said, if your higher power, God's line, is infinitely long, then your line is to scale. You get 1 inch of that big long line. He said the second part of the prayer, the courage to change the things I can. He said the things you can change are on your little bitty 1 inch line. He said that little 1 inch line, by the way, is called humility, because he said humility is defined as being right sized. And he said only when we are right size can we be useful to others. And he said on your little 1 inch humble line are the 4 things that you control in life. The 4 things God, your higher power, lets you work on every day, gives you to do. This is your job every day. He said the 4 things you get to work on, the 4 things on your line are what you think, what you say, what you feel. And he said, most importantly, Damen West, what you do, your actions. Everybody's going to see what you do, Damen. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. And he said the last part of the prayer, Dr. Robb, was the most important one for us addicts, and the wisdom to know the difference between the big line and that little line. I can't tell you how many times a day, to this day, that I get hung up on that, and I have to tell myself, Damen, that's not on your line, and I got to walk away from it, Dr. Robb. But that was the important stuff I learned in there.
You know, I'm really curious. I love that so much, and I'm so curious because I hear you. You know, I teach 12-step yoga, and we talk about if you do too much, you hurt yourself. If you do too little, you atrophy. And what we're looking for is that middle line. That's the pause. That's the, you know, what can I do? What's the wisdom to know the difference? But I'm curious because there are people out there, Damen. I love your energy and I love what you have done with your life. I said to you yesterday, you know, I was given an invitation. I took it. You were given an invitation. You took it. Same with Dr. Robb. And then there's people out there that can't see it. They can't see it. You know, they can't understand how to get to that inch. They can't see how to support other people. They just can't. What do you tell people like that? How do you support them?
You know, a lot of times when I see, that's a great question, Dr. Jennifer. I mean, Jennifer, that is, I call you Dr. Jennifer. Now you just got a PhD too. You got a PhD. This is awesome. Dr. Robb, Dr. Jennifer. Now, what I tell those people is this, that this is what happens when we live in fear. Fear does that to us. Fear is a liar. And fear, well, in the big book, it says fear should be is so serious, it should be classified up there with stealing because it steals from us. Fear robs us of good things in life. My co-author and good friend on the book, The Coffee Bean, John Gordon, John says fear and faith have more in common than the letter F they begin with. He says fear and faith both believe in a future that hadn't happened yet. You know, fear is this negative future and faith is a positive future. So John's always saying choose faith over fear. And what happens is when people, the problem that I think that people have when they can't understand this or they can't wrap their brain around it, they can't function and get out and do it, is because they still feel like they have control. And you've got to give up that fallacy, that idea in your mind of this control that you think you have, because if you can live your life in those ideals of what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do, then you'll realize that so many of the things that you spend your time on, that you waste your time on, and time's the most precious thing we have. Once it's gone for good. So many of those things you don't have any control over. You don't even affect those things, man. You worry, man. Worry is wasted energy. It's wasted time. It hurts you. It eats you up from the inside out. And that's the thing. When you still feel like you have control over these things, then you're going to have these problems with understanding, you know, how do you get motivated? How do you get past this point? How do you get past this bad event that's happened? Another thing that's helped me out that I talk to people about all the time is these 4 spiritual principles. And they're in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And look, there's 5 major religions in the history of the world: Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And at the core of all 5 of these religions are these same 4 spiritual principles that you find in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And look, I've read all their book, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Bible. I've read them all, while I was in prison. But these 4 spiritual principles, a guide for your life, a matrix to plug all your decisions into, is unselfish, honest, pure, and loving. The 4 absolutes: unselfish, honest, pure, and loving. Are the things I'm doing, the things I'm thinking, are they unselfish, honest, pure, and loving? Because if they're not, Jennifer, they're over here on the other side of the spectrum. And on the other side of the spectrum is dangerous. On the other side of the spectrum from unselfish, honest, pure, and loving is selfish, self-seeking behaviors, self-want, self-desires, self-delusion, that voice in your head that tells you you can't do this, or you can't, or you're greater than what you are. And that's where I try to guide people back into the 4 absolutes, because that's a matrix to plug every thought and every decision into.
I love that so much.
Got a message or a question from Jane Burrows in California. Asks about the burglaries. She says, how do you feel about the families and people that you affected by doing that? And how do you get over that psychologically?
So that's a great question, because here's the thing. I have extreme remorse for the things I've done. I can never apologize to the families, the victims of any of that stuff. That's another felony in the state of Texas, to even try to reach out and apologize. So I won't do it. I won't cross that line. Because the 8th step of my program recovery says to make a list of all the people we've harmed, and be willing to make amends whenever, the time is right. And the 9th step says that you're ready to go out and do it, except when to do so will cause you or them harm. So I can never go make amends to the people I've harmed. Nobody in the burglaries, all my victims, will never get to hear an apology from Damen West. So what does Damen West do in his program of recovery to deal with that? I do what's called living amends. That's what the big book tells me to do. Living amends are when you go out and do good works. You go out and do good deeds, and you expect nothing in return, because that's how you're going to pay back that column of the things you've done wrong and the people you've wronged that you can never apologize to. And so that's what my life is about, Dr. Robb. I feel like I'll be doing living amends for the rest of my life for the things I've done wrong. But that's okay, because here's the other part of it. As long as I'm doing living amends, I'm sober. And that's the wonderful part about it. So, yeah, look, hey, my victims, I put them through hell. And they're innocent and they didn't deserve it. But I can't apologize to them. But I can go out and pay it forward and help other people out. And that's what I do.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yesterday, somebody posted online, how do you know, I think they directed it, Dr. Robb, but I'm curious, you, Damen, how do you know how do you get a psychic change? And I know people really want to understand how to have a psychic change. How would you explain a psychic change?
Look, when we talk about psychic, we're going back to, let's go back to pre-World War II, like Dr. Robb said yesterday. We're talking about psychic. We're not talking about someone with a crystal ball. So we're talking about psychic. A psychic change, I think that comes with a spiritual awakening. I think that's where a psychic change happens. I think you have to have something to awaken you. When people say, I had this sixth sense that told me don't go around that corner or don't cross the street right there, that's not a sixth sense. That's the God wave. That's the higher power wave that flows through the universe. And all of us can tap into that. But we have to be open to receive that message, right? And that's when we have our spiritual awakening. These things happen and come in. Now, the spiritual awakening part, not everybody's guaranteed to have that, because this is where we go back, Jennifer, to giving up control, Because if you have a spiritual awakening, then you realize that, hey, there is that God line, that higher power line, and my line's right here. The spiritual awakening, busts that open for you. And now you understand, hey, look, you know what? I don't control all these things I thought I controlled. And when you have that spiritual awakening, then you get the tools with which to live life by. And look, the program recovery has given me so many tools to work, to do my walk in life in recovery. One of the main tools that I've used in recovery is calling somebody, just talking to somebody, getting the thought out of my head, because those thoughts, like we talked about yesterday, those thoughts will become obsessions. And if I leave it in my head, I'll obsess long enough, they'll become physical. If you don't mind, a story for you about a time since I've been out of prison that had this urge to drink, right? So I was out of prison for 13 months. It's a Christmas party, December of 2016. I got out November of 15, December 2016. I'm at a Christmas party with my friend and his wife, and they're drinking wine, and people drink wine around me all the time. My parents drink wine around me. My wife drinks wine around me. These are people that have a vested interest with me never going back, because I'm okay with people drinking around me. I've got to change. Everybody else doesn't have to change. That's the program recovery. And so I'm at a party, and my friend and his wife are drinking a glass of wine, and my friend's wife's glass of wine, the grapes in that wine smelled so good, Jennifer. I mean, I was about 2 feet from that glass of wine. I could smell it. And I'm like, man, whoo, those grapes smell good. And I bet they taste good too. And I started thinking about having that glass of wine, and I stopped. I froze. Like, whoa, what just happened? It's the first time this has happened to me, right? And my friends can see that something's wrong. They're like, you okay? I was like, yeah, I got to go, man. I got to go. So I go in my car. I can't even drive. I'm shaking. I call my sponsor, because I know that that's my first tool in the program recovery. Call somebody. I call my sponsor, and I'm like, hey, listen, man, something terrible just happened. And he's like, what? And so I tell him. He laughs at me. And I'm like, now, what are you laughing about? This is serious, man. This isn't funny. He said, Damon. He said, you're an addict, an alcoholic. You're going to have these thoughts all your life. That's the way your brain is wired. He said, but you've got a program of recovery. And congratulations, you just used your first tool. He said, so now it's time to use your second tool, because you can't get to the second tool unless you call somebody. So here's the second tool. It's called playing the tape out all the way to the end. He said, so Damon, I'm sitting in my car, He said, I want you to imagine that you're back in that party, all right? But this time, take that drink of that glass. Get yourself a glass of wine. He said, are you doing it? I said, yeah. All right, I'm doing it. I'm walking through the exercise. I said, all right, I'm drinking the wine. He said, that's good. He said, drink some wine. He said, you used to love wine, and I used to love wine. He's an ex-con. He's been in and out of the program all of his life. And he said, yeah, you love wine. He said, we all love wine. He said, no, drink the wine. He said, but look. He said, was wine your drink in the world when you were out there drinking and drugging? Was wine your drink? I said, no, man, bourbon was. He said, drink bourbon. He said, my God, drink what you want to be drinking. Drink that bourbon up. He said, now look, he said, I remember your story. You didn't just drink bourbon to go to prison. What else happened to you? You got into drugs, didn't you? He said, what are you going to do now that you're drinking bourbon? I said, well, cocaine, because cocaine and bourbon go together so well. He said, that's right. These are two addicts talking to each other. He said, that's right. If you're drinking bourbon, you got to do cocaine. He said, so snort it up. He said, but I remember your story specifically. It wasn't cocaine that sent you to prison. What was that drug that got you in trouble? I said, man, meth. He said, meth. That's right. He said, now look. He said, all that wine was telling you at that party is that you want to start doing meth again. He said, so pick up that meth pipe. Start smoking that meth. He said, are you smoking the meth? I said, yeah, all right. I'm doing meth again. He said, good. He said, how's parole going? I'm like, oh, man, I didn't even think about parole. He said, we don't ever think about stuff. Addicts don't think about that. He said, I've seen people give up their children for their drug and for their disease. He said, what did parole tell you that would happen to you if you couldn't obey the rules and the stipulations of parole? I said, I'll go back to prison for the rest of my life. He said, that's good. He said, so where are you now? I said, I'm back on the prison bus. I'm shackled up to another human being. I've just let my family down again. And I said, I'm going back to prison for the rest of my life. He said, yes, you are. He said, now look, he said, I remember those bus rides. They were long. He said, when you get to the prison, he said, you're going to be starving, man. You're always hungry after the bus rides. He said, I want you to throw your bags down in the cell, go down to the chow hall. He said, what was the worst meal they ever served you in prison? And without hesitation, I could tell him, pork noodle casserole. Hell, I don't even know what's in pork noodle casserole. I don't think the prison people know. And he said, good. He said, go down to the chow hall, get you a nice big bowl of that pork noodle casserole, and wash it down with that glass of wine, because that's where that glass of wine is going to take you. He said, now, you played the tape all the way in. Do you get it? Do you understand? I said, yeah, I think I do. He said, very good. He said, hang up the phone with me and go back in that party and have a good time like a normal person. Good night. And he hung up. And that lesson right there, being able to walk through that with another addict in recovery, has been something now that I could go back to anytime I need to, y'all. Playing the tape out all the way to the end. But if I don't have a program of recovery, y'all, I don't ever have that lesson. And that's what people in addiction don't get when they don't have a program of recovery.
And then they just, follow their instincts, which is to drink. I like that. I've been told a few times that by our sponsor. The old guys know what they're talking about. When you have the spiritual awakening and psychic change, these are my findings, research for about 12 years I was doing, because I knew that there was something happening. So the psychic change, it's just a change of mind. Don't get all excited, guys. It's nothing spiritual. And then obviously when you have a spiritual awakening, it's something that you've never realized before or something that hits you. But when you have you both, your DNA changes. And it changes so slightly, but your DNA changes. And a lot of people say to me, well, why is that a big deal? Because the big book says the same man will drink again, will burgle again, will rape again, will murder again. The same person with human beings. Have you ever noticed when you go out on a coach trip somewhere, or a bus trip to the seaside with a bunch of guys from work, and you all go down and you have a great fun, when you come back to the bus, what seat you sit in? The same seat that you traveled in. You know, that's all the same stuff. So unless that mindset from self-sabotaging neural pathways to clean thinking neural pathways is changed, psychic change, you're going to sit in the same seat again. And if you sit in the same seat again, you're going to drink and use. I just like that. So give me three major, I know you're grateful for everything in your life right now, and I just thrive off that. But give me three things off the top of your head that's next to your heart right now that you're grateful for.
Okay, well, I mean, the first one would have to be my program recovery, my faith, my higher power. That's number one. Second would be the relationships I have in life that I've built along the way, because that's something I get to work on all the time. And the third would be my ability to serve other people. You know, these are three things that no pandemic, no economic downturn, hell, there's no prison sentence that can take away one of these three things. And I know that because I walked out of prison, Dr. Robb, with only these three things. And those are the three things I can tell you off the top of my head. When I do my gratitude journals in the morning, these are things that always come up. You know, my faith and my higher power, my program recovery is always got to be first, though, because I learned this in recovery, Dr. Robb. Anything I put in front of my program recovery, I will lose. And that includes my wife and my family and all these amazing things that happen in my life. Guess what? If I put that in front of recovery, if I stop going to my meetings, if I stop working with my sponsor, if I stop doing my personal inventories, then I'm going back, and I'll lose all of it. I'll give it all away because you know why? I've done it before. I have failed so extreme before in life, and I'll do it again. My disease can't wait for me to do it again.
Wow. So talk to me about what life is like today for you. I mean, I know life is good, but I'm curious, like you're speaking, you're not speaking because coronavirus, are you doing online speaking? What's filling you up for work financially, but also in your regular life?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, when the coronavirus was going on, about day 2 of it, I was having these egg days. I was mad. I was having a really tough time with the fact that we're all shut down and we're not going back out. And my business that I've built, my life that I've built is evaporating in front of me. But that's me getting on God's line. You know, I got to get off God's line. So I called a friend of mine that's a consultant here in Texas, an educational consultant. And I said, hey, look, you're not working. You have a huge virtual platform. Let's get together, use your platform, my coffee bean message. The world needs the coffee bean message right now, but no one can afford it. Let's just go give it out for free. Let's give it away. And as long as the pandemic's going on, we'll just give it away as long as we're shut down. Jennifer, for the next 4 months, I did nothing but free Zoom calls to people all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I mean, just 27 or 28 different states in America. People all over the world took me up on my offer on social media to have these free Zoom calls with their group, their team, their organization. And what happened was that I get to really live out those principles about being a coffee bean, because I'm faced with some serious adversity. I don't have any money coming in, but I've got this message and I've got this purpose in life to help other people, to go out and pay this forward. And that gave me a chance to do that. It gave me purpose every day when I woke up. And when the pandemic slowed down, when the world started opening up in August, man, I have never been busier speaking. I go all over the country and speak, y'all. I'm gone all the time. I'm traveling 3 days a week, 4 days a week sometimes, traveling all over the country. And new things have opened up, y'all. And it's just like the U.S. Army. The United States Army brings me into their bases and has me train soldiers on mindset and resiliency. I was in prison 5 years ago, y'all. And now I go to an Army base every month, and I'm going to do more and more Army bases for the next 12 months, training troops. This drunk and drug addict that's an ex-con from prison is training the troops in America now on mindset and resiliency. But it's a lot of these principles in recovery that I'm teaching. But, you know, I teach a class called Prisons in America at the University of Houston downtown. It's an online class right now. In the spring, it'll go back to being a hybrid, which I'll be in class 1 day a week, which I love being in class. And my students love it too, because now we're talking about, so we're not even using the textbook when we're in class, man. You want to talk about prison. I don't need a textbook to talk about prison. But one of the things, the interesting thing that's happened right now is that when I got out of prison, I had a job at one of the most prestigious law firms in Texas, the Provost Humphrey Law Firm right here in Beaumont, Texas. And I did my own legal work when I was in prison. And the guy that owns the firm, a guy named Walter Humphrey, he looked at my work when I was in prison, trying to get myself out, my writ of habeas corpus. And he said, hey, look, you put together a hell of a writ for a guy that's never been to law school. When you get out of prison, come see me. I got a job for you. The second day out of prison, y'all, I was working at one of the most prestigious law firms in Texas. I'm on parole the rest of my life. I just walked out of a maximum security prison. I had an opportunity that my higher power put in front of me that maybe 1 out of every million people coming out of prison gets. And y'all, that firm did so much for me to help me out. And yesterday was my last day at the firm because I had to officially leave the firm because life has taken off for me in these other directions and these other callings that have gone on. My business of being a speaker and an author, I'm writing a book a year now, and I just couldn't keep up with the duties I needed to do at the firm. But I got to go there yesterday and just go around thanking everybody at the firm for the opportunity they gave me in life to have this amazing second chance at life. And you just, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for all the things that have happened to me, but that was probably one of the biggest things. And right now it's kind of bittersweet because I walked out of there for the last time yesterday.
Wow.
I love it. I think very clever going back and getting your master's, by the way. I think education gets us through the door, but experience delivers the message. So I think that's really important. So again, we're coming to the top of the hour. So I can't even approach that without talking about your book, what it's about, where you can find it, where people can actually buy it.
Yeah. So my book, The Change Agent, which is my memoir, the one I wrote, a lot of it was a prison diary. And so this literary agent in Manhattan got in touch with me through one of my friends, published the book. It took off. It's y'all, you read the book, you'll knock it out in a day. It's like going through a hardcore meeting for 1 hour. People that are in recovery that read the book. It's a huge book in recovery circles and in the prisons, and people that are dealing with family members with addiction and substance abuse and in prison. So The Change Agent, my other book, The Coffee Bean, which is an international bestseller. I mean, Dr. Robb, this book, I get it. The global publishing agreement that we have in this thing. I got a book in the mail the other day that was in Spanish. I got another one in German, another one in French. The Coffee Bean is in all these different languages: Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese. It's in all these different languages now, but the world's getting the Coffee Bean message. And most recently, I had a book come out 2 weeks ago, a children's book called The Coffee Bean for Kids, because that's one of the things I did during the pandemic. I had all this time on my hands, so I'm like, hey, what can I do right now? And I thought, children need to understand the coffee bean message, and how can I put this in a form that kids can understand it? Because I have this belief too, Dr. Robb and Jennifer, is this: every person on the planet should work the 12 steps by the time they're in the 1st or 2nd grade. Every person on the planet. And so that's kind of what I do. I slip in some of the 12 steps inside this Coffee Bean for Clubs, because these kids start their own coffee bean club and they go out and do good deeds. And some of the rules that they make of the Coffee Bean Club, like one, be kind, be accountable. So I'm trying to slip in the 12 steps everywhere I can in life right now. But you can buy my books anywhere books are sold. Barnes & Noble.
That's awesome. I can't leave without asking you, being a mom, having gone through all of this stuff with my kids, I think I still have PTSD if I ever hear another collect call. I just can't. How is your parents? How are they? It's the family system, it's a disease. This is why it affects everyone, it's a family disease. How are they today?
Great question. I paroled in 2015, I paroled out. I lived with my parents. I was there for the first 2 years of parole. Parole said find one place and stay there for a couple of years, don't move, basically. So, I lived with my parents for the first 2 years out of prison, but my parents came to see me over 150 times in prison. So we got to work on rebuilding that relationship. It's interesting. My mom is a registered nurse. My parents have been married for 53 years. So my mom's a registered nurse, but my mom understands the disease concept is the point. She's a nurse. She understands diseases. Yeah. But my dad still doesn't get it. My dad would ask me in prison sometimes, I don't understand why you didn't just come home. You had this drug problem. Why didn't you just come home and just come live with us? I'm like, I don't know why I didn't think of that. Man, it's crazy, man. It just slipped my mind, I guess, And so sometimes my dad will still say, I just don't get why it had to get so bad. He said, I'm glad, I love where everything's going in your life. But so my dad still doesn't really get it. And my mom, she's gone to Al-Anon. She's done all this stuff. She wants to understand. She's a nurse. She gets it, right? She's a mother too, on top of that. But look, my parents are great. We've rebuilt our relationship. One of the coolest things, a little side note, is whenever I got the advance for the book, for the coffee bean, it was a very big advance. My parents spent a bunch of money on my lawyers. They did the same thing you did, Jennifer. They got me the best attorneys. They thought they were getting me the best attorneys, but they paid a lot of money to get me these attorneys. And it was a big debt that I had when I got out of prison. And I always told them, I said, hey, I'll pay y'all back. I'll pay you back. But I mean, I'm making barely above minimum wage when I get out of prison at the law firm. And when I got the advance for the book, it was a very hefty sum. And I just went and signed it all over to them and got to pay them back. And so being able to do stuff like that and pay it forward and pay it back to my parents, I mean, there's nothing better in life. And look, these people have gone to hell and back where they told me, we love you unconditionally. There's nothing you can do to make us not love you. And Jennifer, I put it to the extreme test, and they did. They love me unconditionally.
Excellent. Damen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I've got loads of messages. I've not got time to read, but we'll put them on the Facebook, and we'll reply to every single one of them. But your story is amazing. Your story is absolutely inspiring. DamenWest.org is the website, guys, for those guys just listening. And the Change Agent, I've just done a search. I think you can find it everywhere, even going back to the Roman times. It's on everywhere that I've searched. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you, first of all. And secondly, I really want to just recognize you for being the person you are. Because when we're in this position, and I know that me and Jennifer suffer this as well, is a lot of people, benefit from our work. A lot of people get well. We save lives. But how many people turn around and say what I'm going to say to you, Damen? You have changed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. And I want to recognize for you and say thank you for doing what you do, because it's been, and I mean, we've been doing the podcast a long time. I couldn't wait to get on today. And believe me, Damen, I've been in this industry for a long time. I've seen and heard everything. Nothing really impresses me anymore. But your name and the way you are and the way you help people and the calmness and the peace and the love that you have for everybody, you've changed my life, Damen. And I want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking your precious time to spend a little time with us. Thank you. God bless you. And I wish you the best of luck, buddy. Oh, and I've got your number. You got mine. We're going to do some stuff together. I know we are. Thank you so much, Damen.
Dr. Robb, I mean, that means so much. And Jennifer, thank you so much. Look, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, look, I wake up every day and I'm telling you, this is something your listeners need to hear, man. You can have my prayer. Steal this prayer. I wake up every day and I ask my higher power for two things. That's the only thing I ever pray for, except for the Serenity Prayer. But I say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it. In the last 2 days when I got up, this was on my list of what God wanted me to do. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to fulfill that and to be useful, man. You've given me the chance to be useful and reach people that I couldn't reach without y'all's help. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really want to thank you. One of the things that I do is I'm an ontological coach. So I study your being, and our being is about how we relate to life, how we relate to our circumstances, how we relate to everything. And really what I want to acknowledge you for is your being. Who you are being in the world is I honestly it's like majesty, it's beauty, it's healing, it is love. And I think you're like an angel or something. Your story is really, really amazing. It's profoundly impacted my life. I know it profoundly impacts others. Love to stay in touch. And whatever we can support you with, children's book, let us know. We'd love to participate in that as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're all just vessels, man. We're all vessels of this message. So thank you for letting me be a vessel. Thank you for being one too.
Thanks, guys. Damen West was on the show. What a great guy. We'll be back just after this. Welcome back, guys. Damen West was on the show. Such an amazing, amazing guy. If you missed the show, don't forget, you can find it on my Facebook. I'm going to make it public any second now. And then from tonight, if you're going to jump on any podcast that you can even think of, we're on there. just listen to this guy. He's absolutely amazing. What do you think about that, Jan?
Oh, I just think it's like, I'm speechless, really. It was a really amazing conversation, show, amazing human being. He overcame so many odds. And there's nothing better. I was telling my son yesterday, I'm like, I'm doing exactly what I love. I'm talking to people that are inspiring other people in the world. And I love that. There's nothing better than waking up and having this conversation. So whether it's 5:30 a.m., 4:30 a.m., having this conversation just is everything. We're doing God's work.
Yeah, we are. And, it's just, I've heard this story 1,000 times. Don't get me wrong. Prison, success, all that stuff. But I've not heard it with the conviction. I want to tell a little story before we leave, guys, because I think it's important, especially where Damon's concerned. I was holding this AA meeting. I was speaking every week. I was holding the book study. And after about 4 years, I just got so pissed off with it. It seems that nobody was getting sober. Nobody was getting interested. So on a speak halfway through an AA meeting, I said to everybody, I'm done. I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. Nobody's getting well. Everyone's fighting against the book study, calling me all sorts of names. I'm fucking done. And I put the microphone on a stand and I walked off to the back of the room and I sat there. And all of a sudden, you could hear a pin drop, by the way. All of a sudden, this guy at the back always used to go and clean up in the morning and wash the chairs down. He had a walking stick. And all you could hear is a click of this walking stick as he walked up to the stage. And I'm like, oh, God, what's this guy going to say? Because I just knew I wasn't affecting people's lives. And he grabbed the microphone, and this is what he said. Can anybody who's been affected by what Robb has done in this meeting stand up? Now, there's about 300 people at this meeting. 10 people stood up. And I thought, there you go. I told you, it's a waste of time. But then he said, of the people that have stood up, has anybody been affected by these guys? Another 30 people stood up. And he carried on doing that until the whole of the room was stood up. And then he looked at me and said, don't you ever underestimate the effect you have on people with this disease. And it's always stuck with me. And I think, Damon's affected millions of people. And we are, because we don't know the ripple effect we have. And I think we need to recognize that everything we say to people today, everything we do, go out and compliment 3 people today. It will change their lives. Unbelievable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Totally love that story. It's so true. We don't know how we affect people. We don't know our impact. And the flip side of that is that we must own our impact, whether it's positive or negative. We must own it. And that makes the difference of being a human being in the world that's changed and has had a psychic spiritual awakening. So thank you for that.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, guys. This has been the Recovery Channel podcast with me, myself, Dr. Robb Kelly, the Addiction Doctor, and Jennifer Lovely. You can see us all over the networks and all over the social medias. So from this time, I want to say thank you so much. Been a great show, guys. We'll see you real soon.
See you soon. Bye. Bye.